Hi, my name is Nick Salaki, and I'm a senior here at Towson University. I'm a mass comm journalism major and an EMF minor. And part of my interest in film is I love watching movies, I love reviewing movies, I love all the actors, and I find myself pretty knowledgeable about it sometimes, most of the time.
My name is Max Redbill. I'm a senior at Towson. I'm an EMF student, and I love movies. I always have ever since I was little, and I probably go to the movies at least twice a week now, because ever since they built the Cinemark in Towson, it's really easy to go to the movies. So I go about twice a week, and I try to watch as many movies as I can, because I love movies.
Tony Wilson, also a senior and also an EMF major. Same deal as Max, really, with a lot of stuff. Been watching movies my whole life, love them, try to see as many as I can. And I watch just about anything. I'm not particular to any one genre or another. If it's a good movie, it's a good movie.
I'm Mark May. I'm a visiting assistant professor in electronic media and film here at Towson University. Previous to that, I was a working screenwriter in Hollywood. I've sold work to Sony and MGM. And I like movies. I dig movies.
All right, so let's just start talking about the category of actor in a leading role. So the nominees are Steve Carell, Bradley Cooper, Benedict Cumberbatch, Michael Keaton, and Eddie Redmayne. So you guys first.
First of all, why isn't there a woman on that? Oh.
They get their own category. That's
There
cool.
we go.
I was really surprised when I saw that, because all of them were the ones I figured except Bradley Cooper, because that was before American Sniper had come out, and like I hadn't heard anything about American Sniper other than the trailers, and I really thought David Oyelowo from Selma was really going to get it. And so I was really disappointed that he didn't. And even after seeing American Sniper, it's hard to choose between them because they were all great performances. But I still, if I had to pick, I would probably switch Bradley Cooper out for David Oyelowo.
I totally agree with you. That's what I've been saying like all award season. I was hoping for David Oyelowo. But yeah, just Bradley Cooper and American Sniper just surprised everyone, even before it became, it was released even before it became widely released, everyone was not expecting it, but it swept the floor.
Yeah, he was, I think, a surprise to a lot, but honestly, Steve Carell was also a surprise to me for this.
Yeah.
Honestly, Foxcatcher as a whole didn't do much for me, but particularly Steve Carell in that role, to me, felt not much different than the role that he's most famous for, which is Michael Scott from The Office.
Mm-hmm.
Like, to me, his role in Foxcatcher was still just like this sad, lonely guy, and he was just, instead of playing it for laughs, he was playing it for sympathy. So to me, it didn't feel like anything different. But I agree that I would have loved Dave from Selma to have been included, and I would have swapped him out for Steve Carell, personally.
I think, the Oscars bring attention to a lot of great performances. That's their value. And there's always something that's going to get left off the list. Performance I really loved was Gyllenhaal in Nightcrawler.
Yes.
Yeah,
that's
was
another
my
one.
favorites this year. So, I think Michael Keaton will win.
I also think Michael Keaton will win. It's kind of a matter of who was the only person who could play a role versus like who did the best work with it, and nobody else could have played the role Michael Keaton did from the writing standpoint, from all the meta commentary it's making. It just wouldn't have worked with anyone else.
I would have enjoyed seeing George Clooney, however, do it if he'd done the Batman and Robin guy.
Maybe.
So there could have been like
Yeah.
nipples on Birdman.
That would have been interesting. Val Kilmer, maybe, instead of but then I also feel Eddie Redmayne is certainly a contender. He, as Stephen Hawking, was just phenomenal. I haven't seen a performance like that. And we have plenty of people who have played disabled or crippled or mentally affected parts before, but no one's played Stephen Hawking like this before. No one has played a role, I guess, as disabled as this, and so it was very impressive to me to pull that off.
Also, there was a lot more physicality that he had to put into the role than any of the other actors, because, I'm not sure exactly how he did it, but when he was in the chair and he like contorts his body so much, and he holds it and he acts like that, and I thought that was what was really impressive about that role. And while I didn't love that movie as much as I did Birdman, I really liked Michael Keaton's performance, but I think when it comes down to it, I think Eddie Redmayne has a little bit more.
He actually worked with an occupational therapist or physical therapist, something, to get those positions right because it was actually hurting his body to do them. So like he had to do that. He was practicing the facial movements in the mirror, and he also, I think, studied his wedding photo. Like he looked at all these photographs and all these documents, videos, whatever, of Stephen Hawking's life to nail all that. And I was just reading up about this the other night, and he said, like, when he first met him, he was really afraid of, like, did I get any of this right? Is this going to come across almost like a parody? I think he got it.
I totally disagree with you. I understand where you're coming from, but he simply, to me, he just didn't do that much. I understand like how technical his performance and his like movements were supposed to be, but I love Eddie Redmayne, I do, but I don't know, he just didn't do much to me. It just really didn't seem like such an Oscar-worthy performance because I didn't really see much in him. But when it comes down to it, he may win the Oscar because like all the buzz he's been getting. He's been winning the Golden Globe, all these other awards. He won the BAFTA also. So yeah, when it comes down to it, he may win the Oscar, but I'm hoping for Michael Keaton because he deserves it more. Michael Keaton really did a great performance.
Okay, let's go and state who you'd like to win and who you think is gonna go home with it. You guys want to go in order?
I personally believe Michael Keaton should win the award for lead actor, but the Academy just may give it to Eddie Redmayne.
I think that Eddie Redmayne deserves it, and I think he's going to win it too.
I feel Michael Keaton deserves it, but I do believe that Eddie Redmayne will win it. And sure, I'll throw in, as Mark May did, the snub of Gyllenhaal for Nightcrawler, because that was also excellent.
You know, I think the Oscars are something that, we're excited about movies because we're movie fans, but I think everybody takes a little bit too seriously. That's part of my feeling about it. So, whoever wins is great. It brings attention to it. I think Michael Keaton will win. Gyllenhaal, I would have loved to have seen one. Tom Hardy in a movie called The Drop. I also loved him in that. There's so many great performances. How do you pick one over another? It's apples and oranges.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so let's go on to the actress in a leading role category. I'm going to butcher some of these names probably. Marion Cotillard?
Marion Cotillard.
There you go. Felicity Jones, Julianne Moore, Rosamund Pike, and Reese Witherspoon.
Well, this is the one category definitely where I have the most holes.
Why are there no men on this list?
Yeah, this is the category where I have the holes because of these. I've only seen Gone Girl and Theory of Everything, so I'll leave most of the talk up to you guys here.
I definitely believe Julianne Moore is definitely going to win this. She's been in the Oscar race her whole life, and this is definitely her year because in her character in Still Alice, she plays a woman in her 50s. She gets early onset Alzheimer's disease, and I guess you can compare it to Eddie Redmayne's performance, I guess, in some ways. She just blew it out of the wind with her performance of this character who had to struggle with Alzheimer's. Yeah.
I've wanted to see Still Alice, and it's been playing at the Senator Theater, but I keep missing it, and I keep not going to see it. I'm going to see it eventually because I've heard the hype for Julianne Moore. But this one's kind of hard because I was really disappointed that this was the only Oscar nomination that Gone Girl got, because I thought Gone Girl was an incredible movie, and I thought it deserved a lot more attention than it got. But I'm glad because I thought Rosamund Pike really was the most unique part of that movie because she played that character in such a strange, perverse way that you felt bad for her, and then you didn't feel bad for her, and then you hated her, but then you love her. And I thought she did a really complex job. She did a really good job playing a very complex role, and I thought that she definitely deserves attention. But my favorite of all of these is Reese Witherspoon in Wild, because that movie, out of all of the movies that are nominated for any award, that movie affected me one of the most. And her performance is very raw and down to earth, but still that cute, bubbly Reese Witherspoon that you've come to know and love. And so I know she's not going to win. I know it's probably going to end up being Julianne Moore, but I think Reese Witherspoon gave a really great performance. But at least she has an Oscar, so I mean, she won't be too upset if she doesn't win.
I'll just touch on briefly since like I said, I've only seen the two. To me, Rosamund Pike is actually the only truly remarkable thing about Gone Girl, and I know that kind of kicked off a lot of the Oscar season, that movie. But really, when I think about it, the only thing I remember is her performance. And it was one, like you said, that took us through an entire roller coaster, loving her, hating her, feeling sorry for her, all this stuff. And yeah, what stands out to me about that movie is moments, which I won't get into for spoiler reasons, that she did, mostly involving Neil Patrick Harris. But so she would be my pick. But again, I have limited scope on these.
Again, lots of great performances. I think Julianne Moore, I think the publicity machine's behind her right now. I think she wins.
Okay, and I am going to actually switch over to actress in a supporting role rather than going to actor. And so the actresses in the nominees for actress in a supporting role are Patricia Arquette, Laura Dern, Keira Knightley, Emma Stone, and Meryl Streep.
I mean, of course, Meryl Streep is in this category. She always has to be in the Oscars some way or somehow. She was great as the witch in Into the Woods. But her nomination is definitely obvious. But we can get down to the other nominations. Patricia Arquette she performed a role that is like no other. I mean, definitely it's a great compliment for the movie Boyhood, because it's like an average household mother, and she just creates the character beautifully. Laura Dern was actually a surprise for me, because I didn't think she would. I wanted her to get nominated, but I didn't think the Academy would actually do that. But I was actually surprised on the morning that they announced them that I mean, Laura Dern's performance was actually just like Patricia Arquette, where she's like a troubled mother and just trying to help her kids succeed the way she can. But both Patricia Arquette and Laura Dern were the top ones for me.
Whenever I love Boyhood. I thought it was an incredible movie, but it's so weird that it's nominated for all these Oscars when really, when all these other movies were being made, they only spent like 3 days making Boyhood. Like, Patricia Arquette only had to act for like 3 days. Now, I don't know. I thought her performance was really interesting, especially this scene at the end. I don't know if it's a spoiler because there's not really much of a story in that movie, but when
Probably try to avoid them,
well,
just in case.
there's a really emotional scene at the end with her, and I thought her character kind of drew me into the movie a lot more, because she's this single mother and she has so much trouble raising her kids because, well, she doesn't have trouble, but she kind of has to deal with all the stuff all the non-fun stuff while dad gets to have all the fun with the kids. And I thought she portrayed that really well. And then the other performance that I really liked was Emma Stone. She has a monologue in Birdman where she's tearing her dad. She's Michael Keaton's daughter, and she's tearing her dad a new one. And it kind of lays out part of the theme of the movie, and the way she does it. It's really close up, and her eyes, which are usually huge, are like bulging out of her head. But that moment was so powerful. And it was crazy that like we just saw her in Spider-Man 2, and then we see her in this. So those are my top two. I think Patricia Arquette's probably going to get it because she's won every other award up till now.
Yeah, I'll echo your sentiments about Emma Stone. I thought her performance in Birdman was fantastic. Part of that is due to being opposite Edward Norton in a lot of the scenes, and I know we'll get to him in the other category. But I thought the two of them had just some amazing back and forth on screen. But the one that affected me most, and it's not even objective, it's purely because of me as an individual, was Patricia Arquette in Boyhood. Because the character she's playing is basically my mom. And so that was the most moving performance for me out of anything this year. Watching these events, which almost exactly mirror my life, and having very similar conversations with my mom as she did with her son in the film, it was very moving to me. So in my mind, there's no question who I want to win, and she does have all the other wins behind her now from other awards too. So Patricia Arquette will probably win as well.
Yeah, I think you can expect Patricia Arquette's going to win.
Okay, and so for in these actors categories in particular, there seems to be a lot of like newcomers versus like people who've been there before. How do you think that that kind of duality will affect the way the awards go? You know, how do they decide this person is now worthy of being nominated versus this person needs to be nominated again? You know, when you're looking at Emma Stone and Felicity Jones versus Julianne Moore and Meryl Streep.
Well, it's funny when you said this person needs to be nominated again. I feel like that's how Meryl Streep got it, because I feel like there were a lot of better supporting women in films this year than her character in Into the Woods. Like, she did a really good job in Into the Woods, but I didn't think her performance was Oscar-worthy by any means. But I feel like Meryl Streep could star in in like a Seth Rogen movie and probably get an Oscar nomination out of it.
She didn't play Kim Jong-un?
She was their first choice, but I think they decided to back out.
So I think that definitely played a part in her getting a nomination, and I don't know, because there are a lot of newcomers, and that's really nice to see, especially Felicity Jones, because she's had a few small roles here and there, and I think she has a very interesting face that she sticks out, that I remember her whenever she's in a movie. So it's nice that she's getting recognition, especially for her role, because I think she had the harder role to perform than Eddie Redmayne in that movie. Just kind of portraying the emotions, because he was making it harder for her to enjoy her life, because she was basically his caretaker for a while. So that was a really interesting
I
performance.
mean, if acting is reacting, she didn't have much to go off of when he'd reached certain states. I don't know, the newcomer versus like people who've been there before, that's a really tough thing to discuss. And for me personally, I don't even think it's something that needs to be talked about, because if you look at other people who have been there many a times, and the person who always comes to mind for me is Leonardo DiCaprio. He's been nominated several times, never won, so I don't think being there consistently or being a newcomer really has any bearing on it. You know, if you performed well, you performed well.
There's always a mix of newcomers and veterans. I mean, how did the veterans first get involved? They're a newcomer. So I don't think it's that atypical. I do think maybe it's a little bit surprising, because it's like, you know, Emma Stone, not to say maybe we don't think she's a great actress, but she is coming right from Spider-Man 2. So maybe it feels a little more disparate than normal, but that's just on the surface. There's always newcomers.
And you guys didn't talk too much. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. It's always great to see all these new faces like Benedict Cumberbatch, Steve Carell, Eddie Redmayne, Patricia Arquette, all these great people that I've actually loved like all my life. Like Patricia Arquette, I remember when she was in the show Medium, I loved her in that. And now she's moving on up and gonna win the Oscar this year. But like you said,
Allegedly.
allegedly, almost, maybe. But yeah, it's a great surprise, and I don't really catch it like every year, like when someone is a newcomer to the Oscar scene. But like this year, it's like really hitting hard with me. Like all these great people, and now they're getting recognized.
And I think you guys didn't talk too much about Keira Knightley. What do you think about her nomination?
She was really good in The Imitation Game, but it was one of those performances that really anyone could have played that part. And I've seen her play that part in pretty much every movie she's been in. It's just because she's such a great actress that she was nominated. I remember walking out of that movie thinking, okay, like Keira Knightley was all right. I wasn't blown away, so I'm not in love with the fact that I don't think she's going to make any splash really beyond the nomination.
And it's interesting because in the actor in the leading role, you guys didn't really talk about Benedict Cumberbatch either, and that's that same.
I think it's almost the same thing where it could have been someone else playing it. I think that's one reason why we all turn to Michael Keaton, is because him as an individual and his history with film is why that movie works so well, at least part of the reason why. But really, I feel anyone else could have played Alan Turing. Maybe not anyone else, but other people certainly could have. And Benedict Cumberbatch was fantastic, but other people also could have been. I think it's the same thing with Keira Knightley.
I sort of agree with you with that. I love Benedict Cumberbatch in his role, but definitely Keira Knightley, it could have been played by anyone, and she didn't really make a splash with her role. Not really something to look forward to.
If I think about the movie, I don't think about her performance first.
Exactly.
I think about other moments.
Mm-hmm.
I would agree that, she's not necessarily on the forefront of things, but, I mean, one of the traps that I can fall into, certainly as a film professor, is to be overly critical of an artistic work. And you can't be. I mean, these performances are apples and oranges. And when we say, oh, it could have been played by anybody, we don't necessarily know the nuances, and we weren't there. We don't know what the director did. We don't know the script. Now, mind you, we're movie fans and we're dealing with the effects, and if something's more memorable, it sticks with us. But I think to be reductive of her is a little unfair. But I also, conversely, didn't think she had that much impact where it was that meaningful.
Okay, so let's transition into our actor in a supporting role category. The nominees for that are Robert Duvall, Ethan Hawke, Edward Norton, Mark Ruffalo, and J.K. Simmons.
For me, this is a head-to-head between Edward Norton and J.K. Simmons. J.K. Simmons for similar reasons as Eddie Redmayne, where we haven't really seen this kind of role before. Like, we've seen the overbearing teacher, but we haven't seen somebody quite go to this level that his character does. And much like Michael Keaton in Birdman, Edward Norton in Birdman is so great in that role because it is so about him in ways. Like, Edward Norton is notoriously a difficult actor to work with. He plays an actor who's very difficult to work with. So it was like, it was basically handed to him. Like, here, you're going to do great in this role. But it's between the two of them.
Exactly. Like, I haven't seen Whiplash yet, so I can't say I'm like J.K. Simmons, but I'm happy to see him in this position because I've loved him for a while. But without seeing his movie, I definitely would say Edward Norton because, just like you said, he was really good in it. Yeah.
I think Simmons' performance in Whiplash was incredible. It was so out there and so ridiculous. It was right on the edge of unbelievable, but he kept it in to this point that you could say, okay, I could see a person going there. And especially the way Miles Teller plays off of him in that movie, their back and forth is so cool, and you never really know what J.K. Simmons, what his character is thinking. And I thought that was really interesting the way he played that character, and I think he deserves all the praise that he's been getting for the role.
The arc he goes through, even just in that final scene too, is really powerful. Spoiler reasons, won't get into it, but he has a very interesting almost transition and then an actual transition. Like, it's a very roller coaster of a finale just in his performance.
Also, his monologues where he's just cursing and saying the most offensive things it's so funny and scary at the same time, watching him shout those hateful things, and it's really, I don't think any other actor could have done it the same way.
I think Simmons wins. I think everybody loves him. I love him. People love him. I mean, they love him enough they use him to sell insurance, right?
Voices M&M's too.
Yeah. He'll probably almost certain. I think he'll beat Edward Norton in this. That's what I think.
I think he will beat him as well. Doesn't mean he's my pick, but I do see him coming out on top.
And also with Ethan Hawke, it's basically the same thing as Patricia Arquette with like the single father and just trying to raise his kids well. But somehow Ethan Hawke's performance is not that memorable, but it was still worthy of a nomination. But it may go down to J.K. Simmons.
And you guys didn't really touch on Robert Duvall because the judge, I believe, isn't nominated in any other category, right? Anyone from there? Does that seem like a wild card?
It feels like another Meryl Streep thing to me. Robert Duvall's been around a long time, and they feel like they kind of owe it to some people to give them a nomination.
I remember when the judge came out, I had some interest in seeing it, and then it just came out and went away, and I didn't even hear anything about it. I don't even think it made $10 million at the box office, which is interesting because Robert Downey Jr. is a huge box office draw, but I wish I could speak to it, but I haven't seen the movie. I'll probably check it out. But even from the trailers, I didn't think Robert Duvall looked like he was giving that much of an Oscar-worthy performance. So I think it is one of those, that's Robert Duvall. He did a new movie this year. Let's give him a nomination kind of things.
Okay, before we jump into Best Picture, let's widen our scope a little bit. And question 10, I kind of wanted you guys to touch on the lack of diversity this year in the nominees. I know last year there was a lot more African American nominees in general, and especially with Selma being such a big picture I know you guys had said you felt like, who was the lead actor on that?
David Oyelowo.
Felt like he kind of like missed that opportunity. How do you think this kind of thing happens? Do you think the Academy should make an effort to ensure that they widen their range, or do you think it's just happenstance?
Well, first of all, thank you for asking 4 white males.
Yeah.
I apologize.
I'll start with that. I mean, obviously, some people, obviously there's been a little bit of a brouhaha about Selma not getting nominated, and some people conversely have said, oh, well, last year an African-American themed film won, so they got theirs last year. That's utterly, completely ridiculous. I don't know if Selma didn't get nominated because people didn't think it was a worthy film, or because it's out of a bias. I can't answer that specifically. I can tell you that certainly there's not enough mainstream movies that are about African Americans and that star African Americans that get seen. So there is a marginalization, and to deny that that happens, I think is flying in the face of reality. But I can't say specifically regarding to Selma, because it was a very, very, very good movie. I don't know if it was a great movie. It was a really good movie.
I would agree that I think it's just symptomatic of what came out this year, because I went under the list of 2014 movies and looked up, well, who else could have been nominated, and nothing really stuck out to me that will hopefully be different this year. But yeah, I don't think it has anything to do with who the Academy picked. I think it has to do with what they had to pick from, and there was just a lack of what came out as far as diversity.
Yeah, I mean, being the least best movie of the year is a really good thing, in that there were so many good movies that one of them had to not get nominated. I am very surprised that Selma didn't get more nominations, because I honestly thought it was better than a lot of the movies. A lot of the performances were better, and some of them do feel like, I mean, I can't speak for the people who voted for it, but some of it feels like they just didn't pick it just because they didn't want to. I was particularly surprised that it wasn't nominated for Best Director when, what's his name, Bennett Miller was nominated for Foxcatcher, but that wasn't nominated for Best Picture.
Yeah.
Someone was nominated for Best Picture, but not Best Director.
Those are usually hand in hand.
Yeah, and so I was just surprised that it didn't get the attention. I can't put a reason why, but I also think people are blowing it way out of proportion, because obviously the Oscars are important enough that we can sit here and have a conversation about them, but at the end of the day, the Oscars are the Oscars. It's not like you're voting to allow people's rights. You're not limiting people in any way. You're just saying, oh, this group of people think that this was the best form of art this year. So I think it's not as big of a deal as people are making it out to be, but I still think it's kind of strange that a movie that was so critically acclaimed and so powerful and got a lot of attention in the other award ceremonies didn't get much attention from the Academy.
I'm going to just jump in on that. Reportedly, the first-time director of Selma didn't deliver her cut of the film in enough of an advanced date for copies to be made of home screeners for everybody. So they were late in getting them out. So that may also have had some effect this year, interestingly enough. There's often a lot of nuances that when we're not in the game, we think we are aware of everything, and there's a lot of chaos theory that goes on at the same time.
Yeah, well, especially because I remember right after they came out, there was on Twitter, hashtag #OscarsSoWhite was trending, and I thought that was really ridiculous. I mean, I don't know. That's a really sensitive topic to kind of like touch on, but people are saying, oh, the Academy is just a bunch of white people. They don't care about black movies. I don't think that's the case. I think it's just sometimes the Academy has very singular opinions, whereas general America, who has seen the movie, has different opinions.
Yeah, and of course, I don't expect you guys to have an answer. It's just, it's a controversial topic. We should talk about it.
No, like everyone said the right thing, actually. I agree with everything everyone said. It's hard to see what the Academy will do a certain year, how they want to choose each nominee, but I guess just coming from last year with Barkhad Abdi, Lupita Nyong'o, the lead actor in 12 Years a Slave, and
Chewy.
Yep,
Chiwetel
Ejiofor.
Ejiofor.
Yeah.
Awesome name.
Just coming from that, I guess I was just surprised, like, just going from that and then now to suddenly all nominees are Caucasian looking, or at least looking Caucasian. I don't know about Marion Cotillard. I guess
Well, she's
Hispanic.
French.
French.
She's French.
French Caucasian.
Well, it's interesting because in Best Director, Alejandro Inarritu, I always
Yeah.
mispronounce his name, he's Hispanic, and people just kind of overlooked that. I think people were just upset that there weren't more.
On screen.
Well, I don't want to generalize anything, but I mean there was some diversity. Obviously, not as much as there has been.
Mhm.
So I understand why people are getting upset, but at the end of the day,
Just let the Academy
it's
do
the
it.
Oscars. Like,
Yeah.
All right, let's move into Best Picture then. So the nominees are American Sniper, Birdman, Boyhood, The Grand Budapest Hotel, The Imitation Game, Selma, The Theory of Everything, and Whiplash. And I just want to start by saying that's a lot of films. What do you guys think about how many they chose this year?
Like,
Well-
yeah, go.
Oh, I was gonna say it's one less than they've chosen the last several years because
Mhm.
the history of the Best Picture category used to be 5 movies, and then they expanded it to 10, and then they expanded it to some arbitrary equation of choices that it could be anywhere from 5 to 10. But it's been 9 ever since they made that rule.
And I think it was Alabama, the BCS, finally went with for Best Picture, wasn't that correct?
But I think, I don't know, there were a lot of good movies this year, so it was really hard to narrow it down to 10, let alone 8. And I think there were several movies that deserved the nomination that didn't get it.
Yeah, there are definitely some that I feel should get it, but then I don't even know what I would take out in place of it. Like, we already discussed Nightcrawler a little bit. Nightcrawler is one of the greatest things I saw this year, hands down, but I don't know what I would swap out for it from this list. Within this list, though, I feel like it will be between Birdman and Boyhood, and then to some degree also Birdman, Boyhood, and Grand Budapest Hotel. They're all up for the most number of Oscars, so that's going to be kind of the fight.
I wish, some part of me says that I wish American Sniper was not on this list because it may have gotten like an unfair advantage because of what people took from it and like when it was wide released and the timing of it all. But I think I would have switched out American Sniper for Nightcrawler. But yeah, Grand Budapest Hotel and Birdman and Boyhood definitely same thing with Tony, like the top 3. But Boyhood, I'm betting that it's definitely gonna win it. I want it to win, and it's Academy will probably go
It's
for it.
one of those questions of what a movie achieved versus its artistic merit, if you will. Because Boyhood, if you look at just what went into it, it's not a question. You know, it was 12 years of a couple days each year. But if you're looking at a narrative standpoint, I don't think it was the strongest story by any means. So I think that's kind of what it's going to come down to among the actual Academy scholars, the people who are voting on this.
The Oscars are a commercial for Hollywood. And the fact that we're even here talking about it now is we add to that commercialism. That's great. They take one day a year, and as opposed to the blockbusters that already have print and ad money behind it, this raises the awareness of these other movies, so it's fantastic. But basically, it's an excuse to have a big party. So, I'll give you my answer, but I would tell everybody, don't worry about it. Go get some pizza and enjoy the Oscars and have a good time. Of all the movies on the list, and there's a lot of great movies. I personally actually think Birdman would be Boyhood, but of all the movies, the movie that I had the best time at this year of these films was Grand Budapest Hotel, oddly enough. And I'm not always the biggest fan of his films. These are 8 great movies, and the fact that good and great movies are all having attention drawn to them, that's a fantastic thing.
And Grand Budapest Hotel didn't have any actors or actresses nominated, is that correct?
Yeah, I feel
Ray Fiennes.
Ray Fiennes would have been
Yeah.
maybe the only one. Perhaps, I don't remember his name, it's Tony something,
Yeah, the
as supporting, maybe.
Yeah.
That's what I would pull out of there.
And Dominic, you mentioned American Sniper kind of sneaking in at the last minute.
Mhm.
And we had also talked previously about how war films are kind of, everyone is, wants to support America. They all, when you watch that movie, you get that patriotic sense. Do you think that kind of overshadows the acting in the movie?
I think it has for a lot of people because people are getting so up in arms about the message of the movie. But when I saw it, I enjoyed Bradley Cooper's performance. I thought that was more what it was about than, yeah, go America. It was like, oh wow, this guy has to do these horrible things for America to protect his country and the toll that it took on him. And so that was what I got out of the movie and how war can really take a toll on a person. I didn't think that, I didn't get an overly patriotic, like, hey, join the army kind of message. So I think Bradley Cooper's performance was what made that movie. I think if someone else had given a lesser performance, then the movie wouldn't have been as successful at the box office or nominated for as many Oscars as it was.
I feel like there's an interesting parallel with actually American Sniper and Selma. Selma is a movie that we can look back on and just say, here was this horrible time that we moved past as a country. Some would say we still haven't, but here's a moment in history that we moved past, whereas American Sniper is, here's kind of what America's currently dealing with. So to me, they're both just pictures of what's going on in America's current day or in America's past.
And I think that's why Hurt Locker won for years ago, because that was like the first major blockbuster war film that really touched people's hearts and like got into them, because of that time. That's when the whatever war we were in at that time, that's what really got to people. And now after Zero Dark 30 and now American Sniper, people just accepting them for what they are. But I also think that Bradley Cooper, I feel like anyone could have played that role and still knocked it out. And Bradley Cooper is a great actor, but I think, yeah, anyone else could have done it.
It's also interesting, you were talking about the other films that have been set during our awards in the Middle East, and I think it's also just part of the times we're in. Like if you look at movies from earlier in the 1900s, all the villains were Germans or all the villains were Koreans, and now it's just we're at a point where all the villains are going to be Middle Eastern. That's just what the USA is entrenched in right now. So yeah, I think it's a very of the time movie as well.
You brought up, kind of everything that's coming along with American Sniper is overshadowing the movie and the acting. Yeah, and it should. If we go to any movie and we're watching the acting and saying, that's great acting, that's bad acting, the movie is making a mistake. We shouldn't be focusing on that. And mind you, we're film people, so it makes sense that we're thinking at that extra level. But I hope everybody out there is not thinking about the acting when you go see a movie.
And so since we're kind of talking about other controversial things, American Sniper, Selma, and Foxcatcher are all based on real-life people and events, but they're not documentaries, but have also been called out as having some fictional aspects added to them. So in these kinds of films that are becoming increasingly more popular, do you think that the directors have a certain, how did I put it? They need to be accountable for how much is real life and how much is fiction, and where they draw the line. Like for Selma, MLK's exact words are not able to use because of copyright rules, and our manager Mike pointed out that LBJ is portrayed as being begrudgingly going along with civil rights, when in reality he was kind of at the forefront of the movement. People say that Cooper's character isn't portrayed accurately. What do you guys think about that?
With LBJ, I guess the director just needed someone to seem more of a villain, or someone who was more of an anti-hero rather than just going along with it easily. But I guess then again, the real villain was Tim Roth's character. I'm not sure who he played, but he's just
it's just one of those things. Yeah, it's one of those things where you have to put a face to the impression. You can't just say racism is the villain. You have to have a racist character for us to hate.
Because Tom Wilkinson, has that. He's older now, so he has that older face, and it just worked well with that type of character.
See, I think it's interesting because it raises the question of when you're making a movie based on a true story, if you have to be a slave to the truth. And I think especially in Mark Schultz's case, he got really upset because Foxcatcher portrayed him in his relationship with Steve Carell's character. There was a weird, almost homoerotic sexual tension between them.
I personally didn't get that watching the film at all, but that's been on.
Well, that's what he was saying.
Yeah.
That he was really upset that they kind of implied that in the movie.
Yeah.
And so, at that point, I believe if you're still alive and you're giving someone the right to make a movie out of your life, you have to understand that they are making a movie. And if it's not a documentary, then you have to accept that they're going to change things about your actual life, because unless you're doing the technical feat of making a movie over 12 years, real life isn't that interesting. And when you're trying to tell a story, the way Selma did, the way American Sniper did, the way Foxcatcher did, you have to have those kind of dramatic points that are inherent to storytelling. And if that's at the cost of what actually happened, well, I mean, that's why we make narrative films and not solely documentary.
Yeah. It's one of those, and this is a broad statement, but it's like that thing of, if you want to be educated, watch a documentary film. If you want to be entertained, watch a movie. And that's not, 100% true on both sides, but that's kind of the adage there, I guess. But the other movie that was kind of talked about for having inaccuracies was Imitation Game. And Morton Tildum, who was the director, he was talking about, and I don't remember the name of the painter, but he was talking about the painting water lilies, and how it doesn't matter how accurate it is to an actual water lily, to the actual plant. It's still a pretty thing to look at and to enjoy. And so in regards to Imitation Game, there were things that weren't entirely accurate, but it doesn't make it any less of an enjoyable film. There's stuff that's, in fact, the final line of the film, I believe it's the final line, the little text that refers to Turing's suicide. It was never actually ruled a suicide. They aren't sure, because it's also consistent with some other things. But yeah, it's just a matter of sometimes you just need to watch to be entertained, not to learn the entire story.
I guess a little side note, I guess he might as well have died a suicide because of what they did to him, Alan Turing, because he was a homosexual, and in that time that was considered illegal, and they didn't like it one bit, so they had to sterilize him. So, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, even outside of the suicide part, that's still like what they did to him was just inhumane and disgusting, and it's still portrayed that way in the film. And I think that's kind of what's important, is that we're still getting that vibe, that feeling of what was done to this man was horrible.
So did they reach that, even though it was like sort of fictional? Or
I mean, yeah, they do the actual. He was given like estrogen injections into his sexual organs to it was like chemical castration, and they do have that in the film. And that is what happened to him. So they get across the horrible things that were done to this man without having to be 100% accurate in all the other aspects.
Mm-hmm.
There's an old saying, when the truth isn't very interesting, print the legend. To share with the Towerlight readers, I just want to say, you understand, movies in general, they're not real. Leonardo DiCaprio is not the Wolf of Wall Street. He can't accept. And there are certain things, as Max was mentioning, that we do in drama. And this is to be expected. And unfortunately, people take movies as history. That's just a simple reality. But I don't think if you're going to be beholden to history, you're going to have an awful movie.
All right, and I guess let's wrap it up with directing. So the nominees for that, I'm going to butcher these again. Alejandro, I'm not even going to try that last one. Richard Linklater, Bennett Miller, Wes Anderson, and Morton Tildum.
So I appreciate the love Grand Budapest Hotel is getting. I thought it was a fantastic film, and it was also released well ahead of your proper Oscar season. That might be why some of the buzz maybe has died down. But to me, it was just another Wes Anderson film. It doesn't mean it's any less of a great film, but it didn't stand out against, I guess, the rest of his catalog for me. So much like Best Picture really coming down to Birdman and Boyhood, I think the directing is also going to come down to Inarritu and Linklater for this. And again, it's a question of, do we look at from a technical achievement or like an artistic side? And honestly, Birdman did both. In my opinion, Boyhood was just an achievement as far as getting that project done. But Birdman managed to push the technical side of the medium ahead with the kind of anti-editing they did and the cinematography and everything else, while still retaining this really nice artistic sense. So that would be my pick, although it's going to be between those three I mentioned.
I think what's interesting is that Best Picture and Best Director usually go hand in hand. And for years, it was always, if you won Best Director, you won Best Picture. But in the last couple of years, that hasn't been the case. Ang Lee won for Life of Pi, but then Argo won Best Picture. Who was it last year? Alfonso Cuarón won Best Director for Gravity, but then 12 Years a Slave won. I think when it comes down to it, just in terms of like what's going to happen, I think whoever wins Best Picture, whether it's Birdman or Boyhood, the other one's going to win Best Director. Just because.
In a way to give credit to both.
Yeah, because both films were this incredible technical achievement. I think filming a movie over 12 years, not knowing how the medium of film was going to develop, is a bold move. And the
Nice
fact,
pun, by the way, how
Uh,
the film's gonna
develop,
develop.
and the fact that Linklater stuck to it, and he made a movie almost every year that he was making this. He made a different movie, so he was constantly working and then coming back to this. But it never lost its voice. It never lost its sense of wholeness. And so I think that in itself is worthy of an Oscar. The fact that he was able to stay consistent, working 12 months apart every time he worked on this film to create one whole that works completely as a movie. But on the same end, Birdman is so intricate, so complex, and so brilliant, the way that Inarritu connects everything and leads you through the movie. Because when I was watching the other movies, obviously Grand Budapest, that has Wes Anderson's signature flair, but The Imitation Game and Foxcatcher, I felt they were stories that could have been told by anyone, whereas Birdman was a story that the direction was a part of the movie, and he kind of like asks for your hand at the beginning and takes you on a ride. And so that's why I think he deserves it. I really can't pick one or the other, but I'd have to say I think Linklater's going to get the directing Oscar.
Wes Anderson definitely has a good chance, but if he wins anything, it's probably just going to be for screenplay. But definitely for me, it comes down to Birdman and Boyhood, because I agree with what both of you said. When you get down to it, I feel like Birdman, the director of Birdman, definitely had the artistic side of it. But then when you get down to like the encompassing the whole film and what it meant to people in the audience, it definitely should go to Boyhood for Best Picture. And then I'm hoping Linklater actually wins for the director because of what he went through and what he did to actually create the film. But I wouldn't be surprised if Birdman wins for director too. Yeah, you know.
I think it's noteworthy that directing and picture are voted on by two different segments of the Academy, whereas directing is voted on by the directors and Best Picture is voted on by everyone. Sometimes it's, that might be what leads to a different result, at least now. I think Birdman will beat Boyhood. I might be wrong.
And unless you guys have anything else, I think that's just about it. You're done. Okay.
Oh, I wanted to talk real quick. Sorry, you were like ready to. I just want to talk real quick about, and this is so minute, but for Best Animated Picture.
Oh yeah, I was gonna include that.
I think it was a huge travesty that the Lego Movie wasn't nominated.
I would agree with that.
Yeah.
Lego
I
Movie
think we're all in
was
agreement there.
the smartest movie to come out, smartest kids movie, smartest any kind of movie. It was so brilliant and clever and happy, and I enjoyed it so much, and I know so many other people enjoyed it, and it was such a different way of looking at an animated movie. And the fact that it wasn't nominated, now I haven't seen any of the ones that are nominated, so I can't say that How to Train Your Dragon 2 isn't that good of a movie, but it doesn't seem like it has that same sense of intelligence that the Lego Movie has.
It's a sequel, so it's in its own way derivative of something that was already out. And so that would have been what you should swap in with.
And Lego Movie had something to say.
Mhm.
It was very relevant to society and our culture right now. And I thought it did so much more than any kids movie has any right to do. But it
It's an
did it
animation.
successfully, so.
It's an animation style that stands out as well, too.
Yeah.
Those are all individually animated and assembled bricks.
So I think that movie, it's disappointing to me that movie didn't get at least that nomination. But it's also disappointing that someone didn't get Best Director. There's all these things.
There's
It's
always
easy to
snubs.
point out snubs, Nightcrawler, whatever, but it must be hard picking movies like that, because there's so many good movies, and then you gotta
Yeah.
say that this one's better than that one. I'd like to be a part of that process, but I feel like it's a very difficult process.
Well, thank you guys so much. I really appreciate all of your contributions.
Oh, yeah,
You got some
definitely.
good